Hello, everybody. Starting class. So, welcome to the week 14 and our final Zoom recording session of EDSC 5600. And I'm going to adjust my microphone here. Welcome. And so, our topic today is related to classroom function. And so, we're looking at is the last section of our project where we're talking about moving up in professionally and in terms of long-term and short-term in terms of what we're thinking about for making a more effective and functional classroom. Okay, so let's look at a project a little bit. So it looks like my assumption is at this point everybody has done a little work on their pedagogical creed, which is great. Some of you had that Dewey reading where he went through and basically said, you know, I believe this, I believe this, I believe this, I believe this, or I believe this to be true. And so your pedagogical creed is essentially just things you're saying that you believe are true about schools or about students or about the way to approach things. So it's a philosophical position. So when we're talking about our big rocks for the course, a lot of that's going to be spelled out philosophically in terms of values and beliefs. That's going to be spelled out in that pedagogical creed. So that's your opportunity to not worry so much about the practicalities of anything, but to talk about what you fundamentally believe is driving you as an educator. And so give it a little bit of detail in terms of that philosophy and what those values are. But it's again, it doesn't have to be practical in terms of operational things that you would do in the classroom, but what the values that are driving that. And so that's how you want to start your paper. And then after that, you're going to add some goals. And so let's talk about that later. But your goals are going to relate to things you want to create self-accountability. So your pedagogical creed is essentially your big rocks related to values. Your goals are some of your key targeted areas where you want to create accountability. So you'd write those in terms of something like, I will do this. I will be consistent with this. I will include this. By the end of the year, I will have done this. So you're speaking in terms of operational things that you're committing to as a practitioner. And again, we're talking probably about next year more than we're talking about today. But if you can do it today, that'd be great too. Okay, so let's think about some of the ways we want to kind of set up our thinking for this session. And a lot of times we get really good ideas from thinking about things we've seen that we thought our reaction to those things was that either we could do better or there was something lacking or problematic or even disturbing about that. So when we look at the negative, it helps us kind of think about, you know, when I see something troubling over there, that didn't come out of the blue. The reason it's troubling is because there was something about it that wasn't something else. I see someone being mean to somebody for no reason, and I say, the problem with that is that people shouldn't treat people that way. It doesn't feel good. That person didn't need to do that. So there are a lot of things I'm not just saying, oh, that's bad, and leave it at that. The reason I thought it was bad is because there's a lot of other ways it could have gone. Or there's a lot of other things that I would want people ideally to do. And on some level, we're talking about ideally. So when you look at what people do, especially the things in your area, you know, we've got people who are lots of different areas. So I'm looking at my students and I'm saying, when people do these things, what do they get from it? And sometimes we say, you know, long term, they're getting great stuff. And that's the kind of thing we go, wow, when I see long term, especially I see when I'm looking at that effect and I say, boy, it's really true to a student's full humanity. It's really getting long-term results for that student. I really see a student emerging. So when I see those things, I say, yeah, what do they do to get that? But when I see kind of an ongoing dysfunction, I see the same problems over and over again, or I see students who are really dependent on an external, or I see really short-term results, but in the long term, I don't really see it happening. Or I see this perpetual struggle. Even though their technique is applied consistently, it's creating this kind of game or struggle. Or I see someone trying to do something and they go, you know, this is just too much. I can't do it. And so when we see those kind of things, we go, you know, what was it about that practice that made them feel that way, or that we saw those kind of undesirables in the equation? So again, what would we want to see? We'd want to see those places where we thought, you know, there's more function all the time. People feel more congruent in the situation. People feel more fair and like their humanity is actualized and people's potential is actualized. And so all those things that we would say would be desirables. So even if those things seem kind of mysterious, then those are the kinds of things, if we're asking those questions, again, everything is an answer to a question, right? So what are the questions we're asking? So let's just say, so what does it say in the syllabus about this section? So we basically need to explain some practices where we're thinking about our situation and saying, so what are some things that would be growth edge things for us, the next level? So I've got these competencies, but if I saw myself at the next level of growth, what would be some of those things I'd be doing? Maybe I've changed some things, maybe I've dropped some things, maybe I've added some things, maybe I've done a better job, maybe I see things differently. So what's the next level of growth for me? So that's what it says in the syllabus, and that's, you know, kind of how we're going to evaluate this section. So I'm not going to evaluate your ideas. I'm going to evaluate whether you're practical and you've really thought about it and put some thought into that section. So again, I would just put a page or so into this, but we'll have lots of ideas here in this conversation. So you might have more ideas than a page, but this shouldn't dominate your paper. But it certainly could be a place where you feel like this is, you know, for a lot of us, this is the place where the rubber meets the road, and greatness or lack of greatness happens because of what we do as a classroom manager or a classroom leader. Okay. So when we think about calling what we're doing something, let's think about the difference between these different quadrants. So I hope that you guys, as you've thought about what you're doing, I hope that we're not feeling comfortable with the idea that we're going to get where we want to go by being that dominator, by being that coercive person, by being the person who says, you know, students, you know, be afraid of me, and if you do what I want, you'll be fine, and if you don't do what I want, then something bad's going to happen to you. And so that you know, make me happy teacher is, I hope that you guys feel like that's, even though we've had those teachers, I hope you guys can look back at your experience with those teachers and say, you know, is that really what I would call my best self coming out? And then some of us have kind of an aversion to being controlling. So we've got to be able to accept that the passive enabling teacher really isn't the ideal, because ultimately what happens is, well, we can see what happens. We can see that teacher where they sit back and the dynamics of the politics in the class and the social dynamics and the hierarchies and the inequalities and the bad habits take over. And then pretty soon you've got a mess. And the teacher said, well, you know, I was trying to give freedom, but ultimately you gave freedom to people's worst instincts and the social structure's worst outcomes. So we have to be a leader. And so if we're going to be a leader, either we've got to think about being a two-style leader, which is more teacher-centered, but ultimately we are about control and about trying to have students be compliant, and or a more of a one-style leader where we're trying to help students become functional on their own. And we've got that example that we talked about in the other class about styles of music. So we might use the analogy of the orchestra, where the orchestra needs the conductor and the sheet music and all sorts of things that in practice and all sorts of things that help them do what they're supposed to do. But ultimately, could we have students who were jazz musicians who were able to know how to play music and didn't need a conductor or sheet music, but they could create increasingly more complex music, more beautiful music, without the need for a teacher telling them what to do. So ultimately, we have to give lots of directions, and that's in any case, we're giving lots of directions. The question is, who's got their hands on the steering wheel, and are we trying to get compliance, or are we trying to get more liberation and more student empowerment and more student self-responsibility? So, and it's funny, I was watching a documentary with the, not a documentary, just ESPN 30 for 30, I think it was. And even a football team, a professional football team, they talked about how when they first started the 85 Bears were a football team who was just getting started in there, and the coach spent a lot of time kind of telling people what to do. But as they got better and better and better, ultimately the coach almost gave no directions at all and just let the team on the field make their own call. And so almost any time what we find is as groups become more functional, and sometimes that function takes a lot of training. And let's say that, like, what's the training that's required so we can allow people to know how to function on their own. And I guess that's a question that you can kind of work with, and it's explained pretty well in the book Transformative Classroom Management, and it's going to be kind of a subtext to our discussion tonight. But what we know is that when we look at achievement over time, if when we go back to our discussion of climate and its student achievement, that student achievement and climate are going to be correlated. But as we look at that correlation, it kind of maps on to this idea. So ultimately what we get is the idea that the most successful classrooms are the ones where we're getting that psychology of success. We're getting that one paradigm. And the least effective ones are down here at the 3 and 4 style. So we can look at any classroom, and it's not just about philosophy, that if I choose to do this and commit to this, I'm going to get really different results than if I choose to try to keep doing this stuff. And I'll just say, you guys, and let's be clear about this. There's no amount of 2-style teaching that's going to get me 1-style results, right? Is that clear? That I can't be teacher-centered so well that I get high achieving student-centered scores. So it's not about how good I am at what I'm doing. It's what am I trying to do? And even doing this poorly is going to get me ultimately by the end of the year, get me better results than doing this exceptionally well. And if you want to see some data on that, I can show you data, but that's not our conversation tonight. Okay, so let's get into the practicality. So our question for ourselves is, what is our next level? So what's our growth edge? And when we look at any teacher, and when we walk down that hall and we say, so who are the effective teachers? And we think about the qualities of those effective teachers. The first thing we'll probably say is the people who are really effective have a really clear intention about what they're doing. And I'd say we could add to that they're asking the right questions. Their questions are one paradigm questions. They want to know how to get more high quality function and more self-responsibility and more love and belonging in their class every day. they're asking those questions and they're finding answers to those questions. If my questions are, how do I get more compliance? Why don't they listen to me? What's wrong with these people? Then I'm going to get answers to those questions too. And they're really different answers. So I've got to intentionally ask high level questions. And if I just go through the day accidentally, which is basically reacting to what I see, I'm not really going to ever move up the continuum. The next thing is I've got to be aware. So that awareness, I've got to build that awareness of myself, my own reactions, my awareness of my students, just my awareness as a person who can be present in the moment, and ultimately take the internal locus control of, it's about me. The best teachers say it's about me. Even if everything is stacked against them, they've got to take the attitude that if I'm going to get better, if this class is going to get better, it's going to be about what I do. Regardless of whether that's, you know, I just saw, heard a person use the term irrational confidence. And I thought that's a great term, because we don't need to know for sure something's going to work, but we have to have confidence in the fact that it's possible. And I think the people who are really confident are irrationally confident. And sometimes when we look at that group of students, we got to go, I just can't see how they're going to be great in 2 months. But if we say, I know I can't see it, but I'm going to have an irrational belief that they're going to be great in 2 months, I'm going to probably get there much more effectively than if I just go, you know, the realism in it, my realistic assessment is these guys are that's just impossible for them. If I say they can't do it, they can't do it. And when we hear that person complaining about the students and their parents and everything about the neighborhood, we know that at some point that's going to translate into them and their fear of their call it well, it's kind of a fear of failure played out as a self-fulfilling prophecy of failure. So let's take a little bit of time with some of these things. So let's look at ourselves and what we've done and what we've seen other people do, or maybe some of the things that are about our personality, and say, so what would it be to move up for us personally? And sometimes watching other people is really good, but this section is not an analysis of other people. This is our own analysis of our own kind of tendencies and maybe our experiences and maybe our skill set. So building more clarity into the equation is going to be a key. So even if we do things poorly, having a lot of clarity is going to make students more sane. So clarity creates sanity. Clarity creates a light in the darkness that people can find. Students don't need a pat on the back as much as they need a pathway to their goal. When you give them a pathway to success and feeling good and getting where they want to be, they'll feel that vicarious love for the person who gave them the pathway. If they fail and they keep getting a pat on the back, they're going to realize that I'm still failing. They gave me pats on the back and I'm still failing. And it's not as great of a feeling as that clarity. So we don't have to choose between pats on the back and clarity, but the opposite of negativity isn't positivity. The opposite of negativity is clarity. So the second thing is consistency. So students need a reliable world. Sometimes they don't have a very reliable world. Sometimes they do. But when we create a really reliable world, then they can build their choices based on the world that is consistent and reliable to them. We don't want them to have to make choices in a random and vague and confusing world that I would just call that oppressive. Creating for some of us, a random world is probably our worst nightmare. The third thing is I hope that this project has gotten us a couple steps closer to thinking about the relationship between what we're trying to accomplish as a teacher and how our management, assessment, and instruction are all going to fit into that. So If I do nothing but really direct instruction, but I really want liberated students, I've got to disconnect. So I've got to have coherence. So if I want liberated students, I've got to think about liberated instruction, and I've got to have, if I want basic needs to get met, I've got to think about basic needs meeting instruction. And if I want my students to feel like they're valued, or they're or in whatever form, then I need my pedagogy to support that feeling. And so we need a consistency there. So I hope that you've all thought about what basic needs are. And when I look out at my classroom and I say, how am I doing meeting basic needs? Love, belonging, power, competency, freedom. If I'm trying to meet those basic needs, then great things happen ultimately, because I ask the right questions, and I make good choices. If I'm looking out and going, why aren't they doing what they're supposed to be doing? I'm missing the fact that everybody's trying to meet their basic needs at some point, or all the time. All of us need to be trying to meet our basic needs. We could deny them for a little bit of time. We all can. But too long, and for a young person, especially if they're really young, so then it's when we don't get those basic needs met, it's kind of on us. So how are we meeting those basic needs? Social bonds, those are those bonds that make us feel like life is fair. We drive down the street, we know there's a stop sign, we know there's a stoplight, we know that there's a speed limit, we know that we can get in our car, and we know that probably we're pretty safe as long as we stay on our side of the road and follow the laws. Every once in a while something bad happens, but there's these social structures that make us feel safe when we get in it, make us feel somewhat like things are we can trust getting in a car. If we took those things away, we probably wouldn't trust so much that we could get in a car. Even something like having insurance, those things are all valuable. And knowing other people have insurance. So no matter what age I'm dealing with, but for those early childhood people, we probably have been given this advice, but I'd give the same advice to upper elementary. I'd give it the same to middle school, and even to high school students. If they can't do it today, what's the remedy? The remedy is teach them, practice it. Not practice it in some negative way. There's nothing negative about practice. We don't say, oh, I'm punished today by having to go practice. No, we just practice it. So, but if they can't do it and we don't practice it, whose fault is that? It's the teacher's fault. So if we practice it, usually we can do it, and then we don't have to complain about it, and we don't have to say, oh, they can't do this or that. We can just go, we practice it, and now they can. And then we spend the rest of the time not having to worry about that thing so much as if we didn't practice it, and we're doing it, not doing it very well, and we're feeling like that's holding us back. And I hope that success psychology activity was useful to you guys, thinking about things that promote internal locus control, belonging, growth orientation. And when we think about those questions, again, asking those questions is going to make us better. And then 8th, shifting from being a leader, from being a manager to a leader. So, and that might be something that you would think about as an area of growth for you. How do I stop thinking about myself as they're all doing crazy things and I need to manage them? Like, let's start thinking about, I am a person who's emerging as a person who has got so much wealth of wisdom and understanding and empathy and a whole range of qualities that I can go, I want to lead these people to higher levels of their meeting their own potential, enjoying themselves, creating community, all sorts of things. So when I put myself in that role, I am a different person than when I look at them and go, how do I get compliance from this group of people that I'm I'm paid to be to herd today. Not that we don't need good herding skills, HERD. So, and ultimately, am I creating community, or am I just sticking with people feeling fair but not really love? Can I create more love in the class and identity and things like that? All those things are explained pretty well in Transformative Classroom Management. If you want something further, you can go to the website. There's lots of resources about that. So it's more about, in this assignment, it's more about intention than it is about trying to be too specific, but you need to be a little bit specific. Okay, so there are things, again, here that are moving us up, but there are also things that move us down. So we can deliberately create less function by what we do. And in the canvas, there are 7 practices that, like the list is that 7 things that you were told to do that will make your class less functional. And my guess is almost all of us have seen those 7 things modeled and someone told you it was a good idea. So things like extrinsic rewards and I like the ways and things like that. So a lot of those gimmicky kinds of things, and they're really popular, you guys, but I would look at that list and ask yourself, am I doing any of those things? And then there's a parallel list of things that you'd want to do instead. So so anything that you'd call bribes, and we'll talk about that in a minute, what that means. I would call that in the unnatural category, and gimmicks, again, unnatural. But then let's go to this idea of a lot of times our parents try to modify our behavior with disappointment and lectures and a little bit of criticisms and teasing. And so we probably have to just accept that while that's normal in society, it's not really going to get us where we want to go. So one of our goals might be to have less of that kind of passive aggressiveness and disappointment in our students, and hoping that that is going to modify behavior, so because it doesn't. So another thing would be to make sure that we look at all the things that we're calling consequences and say, have we created basically punishments? And there's a big difference between punishments and consequences, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And a big one for almost all of us in this room is the idea that 90% of the people who have interacted with us in our lifetime have connected to things that in the end really aren't particularly healthy. And that's our personal relationship with that person and our performance. So when I say I like you or I love you because you're doing what I want, or I like you or love you because you're doing well by my standards, then ultimately I've created a really insecure situation. So you don't really feel affirmed, and you also don't really feel like you got a confident validity of your performance. You got an insecure validity of your performance. So when I say, a great example is the advice to say, oh, I like the way so-and-so is, or I like the way you just did that, or thank you for doing that, and all those kinds of things where we're trying to be personal. And that sounds really like a warm thing. But if your friend came up to you and said, oh, I really like how you always do this, and you think, you're saying that just because you want me to do what you want me to do. Or they say, oh, I really like how my other friend used to be on time when they came to pick me up. You wouldn't say to yourself, oh, what a loving way for them to kind of giving me a sense of clarity about what they want. You'd think, that kind of feels odd. Some of us would be really offended. Some of us would just think, does that feel loving? It feels really manipulative more than anything else. So when we add the personal and the performance together, they might not know they're getting manipulated because they might be really young. But if they have thought about, or it might be so familiar. If they're in middle school and everybody's doing, all teachers are doing that, they might start getting used to it. But it doesn't ever mean it's good, and it doesn't ever mean that it's creating that natural condition that we're going to talk about in a minute. And the last one is, we've got to decide how much we want to involve people who weren't involved, sending students to the principal, things like that. That if we've got a relationship, if we've got structures in place and we're helping a student grow, sending them away can basically just feel like we're too incompetent to deal with it, and we've lost their faith and the relationship with them. So ask me, if I sent your parents a note that said you need to do a better job of completing your modules for this class, you wouldn't think, oh gosh, thank you for involving my parents. You'd think, what in the heck was that? Why did you do that? That's really insulting to me. Why wouldn't you have talked to me? Or why wouldn't you have just made more clarity? Or, that was not really useful. You'd feel hurt, and I would probably lose the connection in our relationship. If it's true for you, why would it not be true for your students? And even though, again, these things are really normal, but I'd say look at the people who rely on these things, and what you're going to find is their classes, the function level gets worse and worse and worse over time, even though probably somebody's going to give you a workshop on how to do this stuff. And it's a funny time in education, you guys, where we've got people giving you really contradictory advice. So you've got to choose for yourself, choose wisely. Okay, so let's deal with this idea of natural versus manufactured condition. So what are you trying to create? What's the difference between them, and what's the problem with a natural versus a manufactured condition? So a natural condition is, it's like if we live in a tent and we eat off a tree outside, we don't need anything. We don't need to change the temperature. But if we need it to be 70 degrees and it's 100 outside, or we need to be 70 degrees and it's 20 outside, that takes a lot of energy. And as soon as the energy runs out, it's 20 outside and we're going to be in big trouble. But if we can build a fire in our tent and eat the apples off the tree, then we could sustain ourselves because we can always get that. So in a natural condition, what's a natural condition in a classroom? We feel like I can be myself. It feels natural to me. The things that are happening feel natural to me as a person. It's not somehow feeling like I'm being contorted into, this artificial relationship with the thing you want me to do. It's a natural thing. I want to do the stuff I'm doing in class. I like learning. I like being with other people. I like being responsible. So those things are all intrinsic, and I can feel innately that they're right. And I can feel like that's fair, Shouldn't everybody have a turn? Sure, everyone should have a turn. I feel like that's fair. Maybe I need to stop doing the thing because it's time for someone else to do it, or I need to give the other person the ball. And that's a thing that we all need to share. Or maybe there's one thing that we're passing around. So feeling that sense of fairness and knowing that the teacher is helping everybody feel like there's fairness and justice and community, equality, and belonging, then those things feel right to us. And so they're naturally sustaining. I can step away as a teacher and people can go, it was fair yesterday. Yeah, it's going to be fair. It's going to feel fair today. And we can feel that we grow in a self-evident reality, that it becomes more desirable over time. We all want to feel like we're growing, like we're intrinsically enjoying something, like we're growing in a group. So all those things, those natural things, the natural learning, the naturally being part of a community, those things feel good naturally. We can step away and they still feel good. And we're going to want them to yesterday, to today, and tomorrow, especially if we're getting used to that. So the manufactured condition is, it takes a lot to maintain. We say, you do what we do what we want, and we're going to give you something external. And we we want you to act this way, and there I'm going to give you these kinds of instructions to do this thing, and you got to do them. And then when you do, you're going to get this kind of approval, and be compliant in the way we need you to be compliant, and then you'll get the thing. And all of it takes it may not, may not be training them or encouraging them to be doing things that feel right. So what are they doing? They're just doing them because they get something or because they don't want something that's negative. So as soon as you take away the external, they go, I don't want to do that anymore. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good. So it takes constant maintenance. And probably what it takes is almost not even just constant maintenance, but it takes more and more and more of that same control and external and that energy. So it's like if we turn the heat off in the house, not only does it get cold, we have to use more and more and more energy because people have gotten used to that narrow range of temperature, and now all of a sudden we're having to use lots of control to make sure that we get the temperature just right, because everybody is so used to something that they can't function without all these things from the outside. So to make me happy, you need to keep giving me something that never feels normal, but at least I'm kind of dependent on it and addicted to it. So ultimately, we're just kind of creating addictions in that manufacturing context. And again, it takes a lot of energy on our part. So which of those two worlds do you want to create? I know that's pretty simplistic, but I hope that you're seeing that connection between those two kind of directions that we can go, because again, you're going to get a lot of training to create manufactured conditions that make a lot of sense, but they're never going to feel natural and self-sustaining. Okay. So let's skip over that. So here's some questions. So I'm just going to ask these questions, and you can look at the slides. So what are you trying to build in your class? So let's just think about what we've done in the past or what we've seen. Are we building something like something that's growing towards something in the end? Are we just trying to build clarity? What are we trying to build? What would you call it? And you can use these higher and lower levels, call them levels of perception. Are we creating systems and principles that drive things, or are we creating a lot of reactions and programs that are driving things? So it's a good question for us to ask. Are we getting better at creating things systemically, so just people can go, yeah, that's just the way it is. I mean, a system is basically, yes, that's how we do it. Yeah. And it's amazing. We can see kindergartners or first graders just going, that's how we do it here. And they don't think I'm doing it because I get a reward, or the teacher told me to, or I need to do it because they just gave me those instructions. Like, no, that's how we do it. I do this now, and then it's their turn for that. Like, they just know. And so if we can do that in kindergarten and first grade, then we can certainly do it for any grade level. So let's talk about social contracts. So a social contract is basically the idea that that everybody has agreed to and committed to something. And on some level, we have them in societies, but we can do a much better job because we just have a lot less people to deal with in a classroom. So we're saying that there are these bonds that come from everybody saying, yes, we've agreed to these commitments, and we can call them whatever we want. We can call our commitments whatever we want. We can call the social contract or whatever we want. Using your own terms is a great idea because it makes it more personal. But the idea is that we all say we commit to this voluntarily, and we understand why it's really valuable to commit to this. And if we don't commit to it, if we don't fulfill our commitment, then we accept the fact that something's got to happen. We've got to live with the consequence. I said I would show up, and I missed the bus. And so I got to live with the fact that I missed the bus. It's not bad. Consequences aren't negative. They're just things that are reflections of me not fulfilling my contract. So there isn't a punishment problem. There isn't a We don't need to build in anything in the social contract that basically says, do the right thing and you get a reward. It's just, here's what we've said about as agreements so we can all be happy. And basically that's the goal. Let's just be alive and happy and easy. That's what we want in a lot of ways, just an easy world. We don't want a lot of trouble that takes a lot of trouble to deal with the trouble, because that's exhausting for everybody. And it can grow. It's a living document, right? It can grow because we talk about it and we go, let's change this. We said this. We said we should, only wear blue socks on Tuesday. That wasn't a great idea. Let's just change that to any color socks on Tuesday. We could do that, because we just decided. We thought it made sense, but now it doesn't make any sense. And so we can just change it because we all agreed it's about easy, problem-free world. Let's not create problems just to say we have a rule. You can call your rules anything you want, agreements, principles. So we're going to have something in our class. I hope that you've thought about the idea of what do you call rules, agreements, but we can't have endless rules, agreements, commitments, principles, but we're going to have lots of expectations. If we thought about our number of expectations, we probably have more than 100 expectations, because every little thing is probably, there's an expectation. If someone is humming when everybody else is working, you probably have an expectation around that. If someone is writing their name on the back of their paper as opposed to the front of the paper, you have an expectation about that. You've got lots of expectations. So we need to find a way to communicate those really simply and clearly, and sometimes we want to put things in writing. So one of the questions you're going to have is, do you put things in writing? But a lot of it is, how do you build expectations? How do they know? How does that teacher, where everybody just knows how it goes, even if that first grade class, everybody's walking around and they go, yeah, this is how we do it. Like, how did that happen? It didn't happen by the teacher going, first day, here are the 10 expectations, everybody. That wouldn't do it, would it? So how did it happen that everybody really understood and knew those expectations? So let's think about your role. A lot of us are evolving in our roles. Like, what would we call ourselves in our situation? And these are just some words that are thoughts, but think about, the more specific and more personal you can make that definition for what you are. You might use a few terms and just go, what I am is, I'm a this and this and this. That's me. That's what my role is in this thing. So the more we know ourselves, the more we're able to act in a way where we're able to act deliberately and intentionally. If I'm still trying to figure out my role, it's harder for me to be intentional. Okay, so we need to have a good attitude and a good relationship to consequences. Again, there's a whole chapter, 2 chapters on consequences in Transformative Classroom Management, but we've got lots of options, like restorative practices helps us think about students repairing what they did. We've got the idea of logical consequences. We've got natural consequences, that maybe students just live with natural consequences. We've got lots of ways to think about this, but let's just think about, just really clearly, what happens when a student makes a commitment. We've all made a commitment. Look around the room. There's 30 of us in this room, and we've all made a commitment to something. And then it's time to do it, and somebody doesn't do what they said. And if we do nothing, what does it say? And that's where the problem with saying, well, I'll give them a warning, or I'll just talk to them. The problem is that we have to find a place where students feel like it's fair and we are working with that person's growth, but we have to look at the collective and go, what does the collective expect us to do? When they gave us the job of being the leader of this social contract, what did they expect us to do? What did we say we were going to do when this happened? And that's a lot of what we need to, I mean, I'll tell you guys, I can't think of an early career teacher who doesn't struggle with the idea that following through is harder than they thought it was going to be. But as we get better at this job, we realize that following through is really critical. It doesn't ever feel normal because there's no place in our life where we really had to follow through so much before we became an educator, because we could kind of talk our way out of it. But as an educator, it's not just us, it's us multiplied by 30 people watching us. So we need to be able to follow through and say what we're going to do and do what we said. And so for a lot of us, our growth edge is actually knowing what we're going to do, being clear about it, and then following through. And I'm not going to tell you whether that's lots of conversations with a student or really clear consequences or stepping up and going, you got to take that away. But whatever it is, students will get used to it. But if you're inconsistent, or you do nothing, or you do something sometimes, or you're personal about it, it won't feel fair to them. And every student in your class is going to be obsessed with fairness. And that's just the way it goes, whether they're 5 years old or 4 years old or 14 or 18. They're obsessed with fairness. And so they're watching you for fairness. They'll forgive you being a little bit mean, but they're not going to forgive you for being unfair. And they're not going to, if you're personally attacking people or careless or unconcerned with people's feelings, then that's less forgivable. But if you say, sorry, I told you if you did that one more time, I'd have to take it away, and I took it away. That's not a problem, you guys. They're not happy today, but we all learned that you follow through, and that person is probably going to be more responsible tomorrow. But if I just say, I'm going to deal with the same problem over and over and over again, everybody starts losing faith in you. And if you just go, I'm going to be mean to you and start criticizing you, but I'm not going to follow through, then people will realize that you're just mean and hostile, and you're not really a leader. You're just a person who's unhappy with things, and you get whiny, and that's not, again, a leader. That's not discipline. That's just you. We've all had teachers who were just kind of unhappy with things. They didn't follow through. So think about the word courage. What would more courage in your job in that category look like? So again, let's make sure our consequences are consequences and they're not punishments. So consequences are things that teach lessons. They're proactive. When you do this, you get this, cause and effect, logical, related, long term. I realized I just had to show up on time, or else I was going to keep missing the bus. I realized I had to bring a pen, or I was going to have to pay 10 cents for a pen, or a pencil or something. I mean, there's something that I'm learning over time, that from the consequence, or I've got to get my work done, or I'm gonna have to do a recess, or whatever that consequence is. Punishments, what I'm trying to do is create a discomfort that they don't do it again. I'm going to teach them a lesson, make them unhappy, and then they won't do it again. So punishments, and they're reactive, they're personal, and they're intended to be short term. So punishments in the long term really don't work as well. And you guys could look at your own lives and say, people who punished you, your response to punishments usually were avoid the person, find a way around it, get used to it, but you probably didn't change your behavior. You just kind of found a way around it. Consequences are going to ultimately change our behavior if we do it right. So let's get into some of those ways that, probably for those of us who have good social contracts and we want to grow. Again, this is more from chapter 4, where we're talking about expectations, creating expectations. But the beginning of everything is creating a culture of listening in our class. So if you don't have that, let's make that a commitment that you get 100% attention, because when you get 100% attention, everybody relaxes. You relax because you know they're listening to you. I'm talking right now to an open group, but if I was in a room and a whole bunch of people were talking, I would just get really off because I'd be seeing those people talking. So I would have to do something. So we've got to find some of those strategies. Some of those strategies could be things like just stopping and expecting 100% attention. So a lot of it is finding a way. The 100% is 100% and it's not 90%. We can't have 90% usually because 90% turns into 50%. So we've got to say in a gentle, easy way. And again, I want easy and problem-free. And I want everyone to feel like this is an easy place to be. I don't want hard work. Attention isn't hard work. Attention is we just accept that we listen. Simple. I'm not trying hard to get him to listen. And I'm not looking at him going, you need to listen to respect me. If I'm trying hard and I'm trying to get respect, I'm gonna have a train wreck, you guys. So I'm looking out, I'm saying, we're all gonna listen. 100% attention. And if I don't get 100% attention, I do something. I wait. I talk to the person, say, fix your problem, but we're all gonna be listening because that's how it works. We have a room where everybody listens to each other and we just expect that we're gonna be listening. It's a culture of listening and respect. It's not because I want you to listen to me because I'm a power hungry person. No, we're just going to all listen. And so let's find, if that's an area, then you've got that chapter 4 that you can access. If that's an area that you're already good at, great. But I think all of us need to find an easy way to approach that area so we can go through the day and with so much less energy than when we're struggling for attention. When we're struggling for attention, my gosh, this is a hard job, you guys. It's a hard job already, but why make a job? It's like turning the treadmill up to 5 times more arc, and like treadmill's already hard enough. Why do we want to make it 30 degrees? So let's make it easy. Some days we can make it downhill. Okay, so we want to intentionally create expectations, right? So how do we do that? Let's just think simply, where do expectations come from? Kind of every single thing that's ever happened before, right? So we can't say, hey, everybody, these are my expectations. We've been in a room where the teacher said, hold on, everybody, the expectation is this, but nobody did it. And we've also been in a room where the teacher didn't really even say anything, but everybody just knew that was the expectation. So why do we know the expectation? Partly because somewhere along the line, it's clear. And somewhere along the line, we go, gosh, that expectation makes life easier for everybody. So let's think about some expectation ideas. And we've kind of talked about these already. So let's just say that there's some things that are going to move us down, some things that aren't going to move us very far, or just going to keep us on our treadmill moving sideways. And there are things that are actually going to move us up really effectively. So let's just accept that put downs, doing kind of crazy, kind of like irrational, I'd say kind of emotionally driven reactive actions are not a good idea. And I'd say pointing out what's not happening is going to make it worse. And it sounds logical, but if you're in that bad habit of saying, hold on, stop it over there, so-and-so, stop it, so-and-so, stop it, so-and-so, stop it. If you've got that habit, stop that habit, because it's just going to keep you going down and down and down. The more you do it, the more you need to do it. And pretty soon you've got an impossible situation, because not only they don't do anything until you tell them to stop, which means you're stuck, but you also need to tell them to stop, but it doesn't last very long. So let's think about next fall and go, okay, I'm going to go through August and I'm not going to use any positive, I'm not going to use any negative recognitions. And if I do that, it's going to feel like going off sugar or something like that. But you can do it, especially if that's natural to you. So the next area is, let's think about use warnings for, if we were all here talking, we could talk about, a warning is for when I don't know. I didn't know that. Thanks for the warning. But when I already know, I don't need a warning. I need a clear, oops, close this door, you guys. Sorry, we're all home doing our shared spaces. So again, personal praise. I like the way and giving praise for the intermingling the personal and the performance. It creates weirdness, you guys. It creates emotional weirdness, and it's not going to get us better. But there's lots of things that will get us better, and we're going to go through those below. But they include personal action, positive recognitions, clarifying statements, and clarifying questions, debriefing, and written expectations. So let's go through those. So why is action so valuable? And you can just kind of ask yourself. So think about in your life when there were expectations, when people took action and said, we're going to not let people into the restaurant unless they're wearing a mask, or we're not going to let people do this unless they're, that's a good example, just so if you don't wear a mask, you can't come in. So if we just had a sign that says wear a mask, and we might have a lot of people not wearing a mask. If we had just people going, hey, hey, you're bad because you're not wearing a mask. But if we just go, look, no shoes, no shirt, no mask, can't show up. So taking action and following through is the best way for people to understand, no, you can't do that. Or just a simple action, like just think about the attention. I just stop and I go, hold on, you guys. I'm not going to talk if you're talking. That's an action. So it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be me stopping people at the Costco and telling them they can't come in. I can just stop and go, hold on, we all listen in this class. So that's an action rather than me going, oh, hold on, everybody. Let me tell you, I don't like it when people aren't listening in the class. I don't need to lecture them. I just need to stop and go. So action's powerful. And if we do it purposefully and consistently enough, people get the point, and they change behavior. And so it can be easy. Again, an action can be really easy. Sometimes it's hard. It's hard for you because you feel like, oh, I don't want to follow through. I don't want to do anything. But again, action and courage together, and smart policy and fairness and clarity and transparency lead to good things. People going, oh, I don't know if I should do it. Maybe I'll talk to them, and maybe I'll just kind of send them a note, and maybe I'll call their parents, and all that passive stuff, you guys, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. So let's be courageous and active. Positive recognitions are not negative recognitions. They are not personal, but they're related to the performance. So we're saying, I just saw you do this, and you couldn't do that yesterday, but you can do it today, and that's really cool. Or that's a great answer. What do where did you come up with that idea? And so we're saying, I see what you did. Tell me about what you think about it. Or I'm recognizing what you were trying to do was great. So I'm not saying I like you because you did what I wanted. I'm saying I recognize what you were trying to do, and look at that. That's great. So we can't do enough of that. We don't need to get silly overboard on it because it starts sounding artificial. But we can do a lot of that throughout the day. And again, not praise, positive recognitions, and expectation cues. So expectation cues are a way to say, here's the expectation, and I'm looking for people who are meeting that expectation, or what are you doing to meet the expectation? So, so if I say I'm looking for the ready group, they already know what a ready group is, and so they're looking to get ready, and there's urgency in that expectation cue. So those are the kind of things that could potentially, I mean, again, use them wisely. I mean, they can all these things can backfire if we don't think through what we're trying to do. If we're mechanical about it, sometimes it could sound mechanical, but what we're trying to do is create a fun, easy energy in the room, and not a feeling like, again, technique, 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 technique. Oh, I like the way you're doing this. Oh, thank you for doing this. Or, so it makes me so happy when you do this. All that kind of artificial manufactured technique-y stuff, they can tell, and they feel like, why are they talking that way? What, like, am I just a dog to them? You know, why are they talking to me that way? And they might get used to being talked to like a dog, but let's talk to them like human beings. And I think they're going to go, gosh, you know, this is just easier, and I feel normal, and gosh, that feels more organic to me than being talked to like I'm just getting reinforced for compliance. Clarifying questions are a great idea. So when I make a statement, it doesn't go in the same part of your brain as a clarifying question. So if I say, what, if you were going to do this, what would you be doing right now? Give them that question. Like, oh, what would I be doing right now? That goes in more than, you need to be done in 5 minutes. That's useful, but it's not as useful as, when you're done in 5 minutes, who's going to be presenting? Are you going to be ready in 5 minutes? What would you need to do to be ready in 5 minutes? Then I'm like, oh, answer that question in my mind. So I don't need to give them an answer, and I don't need to hear an answer. I just need to throw the question out, and they go, yeah. But I can, you know, it's not, you know, I can also say, you know, I'm seeing people who do this, and that's a great idea. So the positive recognitions are a great companion to that, especially the collective ones. And I hope that we're all thinking about the power of debriefing. You know, it's one of those things we miss in an online class, but if we had the chance to actually have a proper class, taking time to stop at the end of the activity, we're not really going to be able to debrief very much at all, which is, it's going to, I hope it's a conspicuous thing you can tell that's missing from an online course like this. So we could debrief, but then it would take a whole lot more time and effort, which it's just much less fun than doing it online than it is in live, and saying, you know, so what are some things you do better next time? What's a person in the class that did a great job of, person in your group that did a great job of effort? What's a person in your class group that did a great job of being of their role? What's something that you guys would do next time and not do next time? What's something that you give advice to another group about this task? Like, those questions, those debriefing questions, are powerful ways for them to reflect and grow. So one of the things I'd say, you guys, you know, from my experience, I spent a lot of time supervising, and a lot of people come from classes that, you know, where they kind of went through these, and I've seen people who had naturally great ability, and they start off really good because they connect with the students, and they've got that kind of great teacher personality, and they come off really strong. But if they don't use good technique, they get slower and slower and slower, in that tortoise and hare analogy. But the people who come in and they're timid and they've never been a teacher and they don't really feel confident, but they just stick to the technique, and they go, you know, I'm going to be really clear, and I'm going to use good technique. And pretty soon students are like, okay, yeah. And then the students start feeling like they're on their side, and they feel safe, and they start feeling like, yeah, you know, I trust this person, even that, you know, even though they're quiet voice and they're kind of like not all that domineering, I feel like, yeah, you know, and work loud, like, yeah, they follow through. They're clear. They give good instructions, and pretty soon the whole class is like, yeah, and they've gotten better and better and better. And by the end of the semester, all the students are feeling like, yeah, this is easy and positive. And then the other teacher starts feeling like, oh, you know, I've got issues with this student, and this student kind of didn't like this, and people need a lot of dominance. And again, it comes down to a lot of effort. Personality takes a lot of effort. technique can make our life a lot easier. Last idea, and I hope that you guys kind of include this in your thinking, is that we probably need to think about two levels of our timeline. So one level is things that after about a month are in place. So I probably want to have some goals about my attention level, some of the routines are in place, why the class is just kind of on autopilot by October 1st, and why all the effort that I put in has paid off, and they're kind of just, it's just kind of, we're just easy energy. So I would call those kind of October 1st goals, or maybe November 1st, depending on your group. But ultimately, by the end of the year, what do you want? How have they grown? Let's go back to our pedagogical creed. How have you influenced these people over the course of a year? So what can they do that they couldn't do at the beginning of the year? And how do you feel when you walk in the room versus how you felt when you were on October 1st? So think about kind of both those points in time, those early in the year, and then that kind of by the end of the year. Make sense? So again, your project is going to have these sections. So your pedagogical creed, your goals, your big curriculum product in the middle that you guys are working on. And again, you guys can work on those in teams, but the rest of these sections, let's do them on our own. So we talked in the last online session about instructional methods as one of the areas of growth, but I hope that you guys put some time into the thought for this section too. You're thinking for this section about some of the ways you want to grow in collective function. And so that's well, I guess we'll just finish with where we started. So we're going to start our project with our pedagogical creed and then add some goals. So probably some of this, some of these next level function things might be involved in those sections. So, but this is your big picture, and then your next level sections are going to be some ways that you kind of explain that. So people did it different ways. So look at the models. That's it for tonight, and do contact me if you have questions, you guys. But so far, what I'm seeing, this might be a future group I'm talking to, but so far I'm seeing people's projects being pretty good and coming along. So I hope you're thinking on this section. There's lots of resources. If you want more resources, there's a bunch of reading on Canvas related to these topics. So if you want more reading, I'm not assigning any of that reading. I hope that the PowerPoint and this Zoom has been useful in your thinking, but let's think about ways that that we want to grow and commit to those ways and then put them in our paper. So good to be with you guys tonight. And I'm gonna stop the share and stop the recording. Well, I'll see you guys next week.